U.S. lawmakers have advanced a controversial bill that could impose sanctions on South Africa over its foreign policy ties with Russia and China. This bold move threatens to disrupt diplomatic and trade relations, sparking global concern and fierce debate over South Africa's international stance. In a dramatic turn of events that could send shockwaves across international diplomacy and economic relations, a group of influential U.S. lawmakers have advanced a bill that threatens to impose sanctions on South Africa over its foreign policy positions, particularly its close ties with countries like Russia and China, and its perceived hostility or indifference toward key U.S. interests. The bill, which has now moved through a critical early stage of the legislative process, signals a stark deterioration in relations between Washington and Pretoria, sparking urgent questions about the future of South Africa's foreign policy, trade dynamics, and global standing. Before we dive into the implications of this unprecedented move, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more breaking updates and fearless analysis right here on Nation Brief. We keep you informed, neutral, and ahead of the curve on the biggest stories shaping global politics and the African continent's place in them. This latest development is not just symbolic, it's a real diplomatic escalation. The proposed legislation, championed by members of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee, essentially accuses South Africa of undermining American national interests by aligning itself with authoritarian regimes, refusing to condemn actions that the U.S. considers violations of international norms, and hosting joint military drills with nations currently sanctioned or at odds with the West. South Africa's hosting of naval exercises with Russia and China earlier in 2023, for example, was a particularly sore point that angered officials in Washington. To understand how we got here, one must rewind several months. The Biden administration and several senior members of Congress had quietly raised concerns over South Africa's increasingly non-aligned or multipolar stance on foreign affairs. From abstaining on United Nations votes condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine, to strengthening BRICS partnerships, South Africa has taken a firm stand on its sovereign right to pursue an independent foreign policy. However, that independence is now being challenged in the most forceful way yet. The bill, which still has a long way to go before becoming law, proposes a detailed framework for assessing South Africa's foreign policy behavior and its impact on U.S. interests. It instructs the U.S. State Department to investigate whether South Africa is in violation of the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, COTSA, and whether its activities are contributing to global instability or undermining democratic institutions. If the findings are deemed negative, the U.S. could impose targeted sanctions, ranging from asset freezes to restrictions on financial transactions, or even limitations on trade deals and military cooperation. This is not just a paper threat. The very notion that South Africa could be placed under sanctions by its largest non-African trading partner is enough to rattle markets and strategic planners. For a country already grappling with high unemployment, energy crises, and currency instability, the prospect of U.S. sanctions adds a new layer of geopolitical uncertainty. Economists and policy analysts have already begun modeling scenarios in which South African exports, particularly those in the agriculture, automotive, and mining sectors, face restrictions or tariff hikes in the American market. Even more concerning is the reputational fallout. If the bill gains traction, it could tarnish South Africa's image in the eyes of Western investors and multinational corporations who may see the country as a riskier environment. Add to that the possibility of secondary sanctions, where companies or governments doing business with South Africa may themselves face U.S. penalties, and you have a diplomatic powder keg that could reshape alliances and financial flows for years to come. South African officials have not remained silent. The Department of International Relations and Cooperation, DIRCO, has condemned the bill as a blatant overreach and an assault on the country's sovereignty. Minister Naledi Pandor, known for her firm and articulate diplomatic style, has reaffirmed South Africa's commitment to a balanced, non-aligned foreign policy that serves its national interests first. "We are not an extension of any global power bloc," she said in a statement that echoed sentiments of many in the global south who are increasingly disillusioned with Western double standards. and that's the heart of the debate. Supporters of South Africa's position argue that the US is acting hypocritically, punishing countries that refuse to toe its line, while turning a blind eye to the transgressions of its allies. They say the world is evolving into a more multipolar order where the US can no longer dictate the rules without pushback. Critics of the bill call it a Cold War-era tactic that fails to recognize the new dynamics of international power, trade, and influence. But US lawmakers see things very differently. They argue that America has a responsibility to ensure that its partners and trade allies are not emboldening rogue states, or indirectly financing conflicts that the West is trying to resolve. The narrative is one of accountability. If South Africa wants the benefits of trading with the US, it must also accept the responsibilities of alignment with democratic values and global security interests, they argue. What makes this situation particularly volatile is the timing. The US is in the middle of an election season, and foreign policy hawks in Congress are keen to appear tough on nations that defy American leadership. Meanwhile, South Africa has just emerged from its own high-stakes national elections, which resulted in a fragile coalition government that must now navigate not just domestic instability, but international pressure as well. South Africa's ruling ANC has historically enjoyed warm relations with countries like Cuba, Russia, and China, rooted in their support during the anti-apartheid struggle. But in today's global order, those loyalties are being tested against the hard realities of economics and security. With BRICS expanding and offering an alternative development path, Pretoria's tilt eastward is not surprising, but it comes at a cost. The bill's authors have suggested that it is not intended to punish the South African people, but to encourage a reassessment of dangerous foreign policy choices. Whether that message resonates in Pretoria remains to be seen. Analysts say much will depend on how the Biden administration responds to the bill, whether it embraces it fully, tries to water it down, or quietly shelves it in favor of back-channel diplomacy. Either way, this moment represents a fork in the road. Will South Africa double down on its sovereign stance, risking economic backlash? Or will it soften its position to preserve critical trade and diplomatic ties with the US? The stakes could not be higher, and the world is watching. As this story continues to unfold, one thing is clear: the age of easy alliances is over. We are entering an era where middle powers like South Africa will be forced to choose, or at least define more clearly, their place in the shifting tectonics of global influence.